Broadcasting live from the Roswell Infinity Studio, located inside Digital Ignition, where North Atlanta startups take off. It's time for North Fulton Business Radio.
And hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of North Fulton Business Radio. I'm John Ray, your host. It's a great day to be in Alpharetta. It's springtime, and we've got a great guest, Jason Moccia, who's the CEO of OneSpring. And we'll turn to Jason in a second. He's got a lot of interesting information to share with us about the great work he's doing at OneSpring. But before we get to Jason, I want to remind our listeners that Digital Ignition, where we have our studio, is the ultimate place for entrepreneurs to work, innovate, learn, establish, and grow their companies. And listen to Business Radio X, by the way. Nestled within a 45,000 square foot building is an open floor plan with co-working office space, dedicated desk, private offices, meeting rooms, event space, a classroom, and a fantastic break room with outdoor patio and all the fresh ground coffee you can drink. If you want great co-working as well as space which impresses investors, customers, and future employees, visit digitalignition.com. Now we turn to Jason Moccia, and Jason is the CEO of OneSpring. Jason, welcome.
Hey, John. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. You're doing a lot of great work at OneSpring. For those that don't know about OneSpring and don't know you, introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So Jason Moccia, as John mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of OneSpring. We started here in Atlanta back in 2005, and a lot of the work we do is around designing software applications. So we don't get a lot into the development side. We really focus in on designing better blueprints for software, and that's kind of where we've grown our business out of. And we've been doing it, like I said, since 2005 in the commercial and the federal space. So we've kind of been one of those companies that have made the leap to be able to work in the federal space and figure out how to operate there. So it's been an interesting journey.
Now, for those that aren't software designers, talk about the difference between doing the blueprint, you said,
right,
and actual design. What does that mean?
Well, let me go back kind of to the beginning, if I can. So
Sure.
When I started the company, I was doing requirements for software. It was actually a role called a business analyst, and I did that right out of school back in the mid-'90s, and figured out a better way to actually design software. And the traditional way is textual-based. So if the easiest analogy is thinking about maybe a house you want to build for yourself. Would you define the blueprints for that house in text, or would you use graphics and visuals to define the specs for that house? So software traditionally has been textual-based definition. So how does a software need to function? What does a user do when they go there? Just imagine writing all of that out and then having a developer read that and try to develop from that. That's how it used to be done. Now, a lot of companies actually prototype and use design to tell a story, to actually show consumers and users what the application and software should look like, how it should function. So in 2004, I met my business partner. He's more on the user experience side, which is somebody who designs and can really lay out an interface for different types of applications. And we joined together and actually started OneSpring and really instilled a better way to define the requirements, and that was through design.
So that's really what you're getting at when you're talking about human-centered design.
Right.
Yeah.
So human-centered design is kind of the core discipline that we instill in everything we do. And it's really about putting the users at the center of the problem. So think about any application you use, on your mobile phone or website. So a lot of companies, and they still do this, not as much as they used to, but I think their companies are getting a lot better at designing software, but they would not necessarily bring the users into the equation right away. And I'm actually going through this with the client right now, where I'm proposing that we do the research, we go talk to the users, their customers, and say, look, let us do the research, define the optimal way for a customer to use what you want us to help define. And let's not just make it up. Let's not sit in a room together and just think we know. Even though we're users ourselves, we don't necessarily know what your customers are thinking, so we can't assume anything. We need to talk to them. We need to get in front of them and bring them in and actually design a solution around that user, and that's human-centered design.
This is a message I would think that some clients don't want to hear, that they don't really know what their customers are thinking sometimes, right? But this is a common thing with folks in business, and we've all made this mistake, I have to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's becoming more prevalent now, more accepting. When I started out early on, we didn't really prototype designs up front. We didn't really bring in users as much. Now, what we would do is we would get together with customers and just say, what do you want, right? Just give me your list of requirements. So we would write those out in text. Okay, you want to have the ability to log in? Yes. Ability to register, do something, buy something, right? So the issue with that is customers don't always know what they want. You typically have to show users, here's what we think it should be based on what you told us. What do you think? Right? And we've all heard of focus groups and things like that, where you actually bring customers in and ask them, but now we're actually showing them through design. So we'll create a prototype and we'll let them click through that prototype before we even start actual development. The main reason for that is not only getting a better product at the end of the day, but it's also reducing the development cost overall.
Sure. A lot fewer mistakes to correct later, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the primary advantage, is you're trying to reduce rework. So most of the money in software development is spent on the development side. It's not the design side and the requirements side. Typically, that's about 20% of a project, let's say, just doing the design and requirements, what do you want type of questions. The rest is development and testing. So where a lot of the costs get out of control, and we've all been there where projects have gone over budget, they've gone on too long, and so forth, is the rework side. So you design, you do some requirements, you pass it over the wall, development team builds it, then they finally show the client. Well, now you have something that's built that you have to change. So to go back to the house analogy, you put up all the walls, you created the kitchen, right? Everything's there. Now your customer's walking into the house, seeing it for the first time, and saying, "Wait a minute, that I didn't say 2 rooms, I said 3 rooms. Why is there just 2 rooms here?" Well, now we got to fix that, and there's a tremendous cost to do that. It's the same in software. So we try to create those rooms and the layout in the beginning to reduce that rework cost at the end.
Makes sense. Now, there's a reason to do all this, and it's to gain a competitive advantage. Share a little bit about how that works. I mean, what's the competitive advantage for a company or an agency to use your services? What do they get back?
Well, there's a couple of things here. So some of your listeners may have heard of a term called customer experience, or CX, I'll just call it CX for short.
Sure.
And CX is a growing area right now. And CX is all about optimizing the experience that a customer has. And it could be the experience they have when they walk into a store, right, and they flow through your retail store. It could be when they call the call center, right, and they need to solve a problem. The website, mobile, right, omni-channel type strategies where what is the overarching experience that a customer has when they interact with the brand. So we've all had experiences where you go to the website and it's a fantastic experience, then you call the call center and it's a very poor experience, right, and you end up pulling your hair out trying to get something done, for example. So CX is all about understanding the full life cycle of all the channels that a customer interacts with to try to optimize the experience they're having. That's customer experience. Mm-hmm. So, the advantage to a company getting that right, there's statistics out there that are very specific around revenue growth and potential for companies that are doing CX well and companies that are doing it very poorly, the laggards, basically. I actually have some statistics here I wrote out. So, for example, companies that do CX well have a 5.1x revenue growth over the laggards. So there's a real impact to getting it right and having a better experience overall. So,
Now,
So
you said 5.1 times?
revenue growth is 5.1x that of the laggards if you get CX right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That was worth repeating, Jason.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Wow, that's a big number. Yeah.
Annual revenue for customers is 2.4x more for companies that do CX well. So there are different statistics that you see, and I think the reason this has all happened is if you go back in time and you look at, say, the 60s, 70s, or you can even go earlier than that, the way customers are buying and expectations has grown exponentially, especially with mobile devices.
Sure.
Right when the iPhone came out in 2007, the expectations have gone through the roof. So we started off as consumers buying goods, and then we bought products and then services, and now customers are buying experiences. So a good example of this I thought of is Avalon in Alpharetta. Most of and I don't have stats on this, but our office is at Avalon, so I'm always there and I observe a lot, just being there.
Yeah, you live it, right?
I live it. I've been there for years now.
Sure.
And not everybody that goes there buys anything, right? They may go and just walk around. There may be a concert. There may be pop-up stores that they just browse at. It's a fun place to bring the kids and have a good experience. So Avalon's done a good job with just let's create a better experience. And that's the traditional malls haven't been doing that, right? The traditional malls are the laggards.
Sure.
So you go to a traditional mall now, you walk through and you're trying to get around the kiosks right in the middle of the mall, and you're being hounded, right? It's not as good of an experience anymore. So there's a new model, which is kind of that outdoor type mall model. And they've been extremely successful as a result. So it's about the experience, not going just to get a product. So if you think about other companies that are dealing with that, they're trying to improve the overall experience that a customer has in the hopes that eventually they'll buy something. But in order for them to shine over a competitor, they have to improve that experience. And that's what CX is about.
Good stuff here from Jason Moccia. And Jason is the CEO of OneSpring. Now, Jason, you have had a evolution in terms of the clients you work with. I know you started out in the commercial space, I believe, and have kind of morphed into the federal government, working with federal government agencies. Describe who you work with and the types of clients that you have.
So, we started just doing 100% commercial work, and a lot of large clients. A lot of large automotive clients, consumer beverage clients here in Atlanta. Most of our work has been, on the commercial side, has been in Atlanta area, Alpharetta. We have a lot of clients too. The federal side, we made the leap when the economy crashed in around 2008. So on the commercial side, companies weren't buying as much as they were or once doing. And we decided to make a change and say, look, let's start focusing on the federal space and figuring out how we can sell into that, because there was a lot of spending going on to increase the economy, right? So we ended up flying there, mostly me and my partner Robert. We would go every other week, for a year solid, just spend a lot of time in D.C., and it took us about a year to get our first project, and that was with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, so Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. A very large project. In fact, they were spending $40 million a year on a mainframe system just to maintain it. So our goal was to modernize that mainframe and to come up with better specifications and designs for it. And we spent probably a year and a half almost, working on that project, just doing the designs for it. So that was our first project. That was around 2009, 2010. We went on to do other projects at ICE and Customs and Border Protection. We're in IRS right now, USDA also. So we've been around at different agencies doing work, and we're about 50% federal now and 50% commercial.
So in the case of the federal government work that you do, you talked about customer experience. So are you improving the design of software to help those that run that software internally, or is this customer facing, like taxpayer facing, or how does this work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's civilian facing,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't do as much on the DoD side, defense. we're trying to. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity within DoD. It started off where, a lot of people have the mentality just make it work. We need something that works. We need to perform a certain task. So it was more engineered design or development design. So surprisingly, the government over the past several years have really started pushing into customer experience directly. They actually have contracts out just to do CX and user experience work. They're starting to take it seriously. So a lot of these solicitations that come out will actually see human-centered design mentioned. And we end up partnering a lot on different opportunities where OneSpring will be the human-centered design consulting company, team with a much larger company. And I'll say, you OneSpring, do the human-centered design, we'll do the development side. So, in fact, customer experience is actually listed as a presidential mandate. So if you go to OMB, that's the Office of Management and Budget within the White House, you can find the core presidential mandates or goals, and customer experience is listed as a goal. So we saw that back in, I guess it was early 2018, and said, this is, we're onto something here. We've been doing it for a while, but now it's becoming more mainstream. So it's a good time right now with companies really realizing, look, we need to focus on, bringing the users in and designing software that they like to use and want to use, and that's useful overall.
So there are some businesses out there that are listeners that I know, have an interest in dealing with the government at various levels, whether that's federal or state or what have you. Address the differences in dealing with the federal government in your case versus the commercial space.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's, as you can imagine, very different.
Sure.
And I would say the business development cycle is much different. So in the commercial space, you really have no barriers. A lot of it's relationship based. The intelligence that you have to gather could be more difficult in commercial, surprisingly. And the reason for that is in the federal space, it has to be very public, right? So if the government comes out with a need, they're putting it out there for everybody to see. So where it becomes more sophisticated on the federal side is you have to know how to operate and you have to have the right contract vehicles to do business. Some of your listeners may have heard of GSA schedule, for example. That's a type of contract you can get with the federal government. GSA Schedule 70 is what we have. That's to buy and procure IT services. And to get that type of vehicle took us almost a year of paperwork and going through the process. So a lot of small businesses are intimidated, to get into the federal space because it takes a long time. They don't understand the buying process and how that works. And, they're not willing to invest what it's really going to take in manpower and money and time to make it happen. And you may invest all that time anyway, and it may not be successful. You may not get anything. I don't have the statistics, but I know for a fact there are a lot of companies that get a schedule with GSA, and they never get anything on it. So it's definitely not something that they're just going to hand you business if you have a contract. So there are some things we've gone after where it takes weeks and weeks of work, hard work, to try to get the contract. You get it, and you may not make anything on it at all. You have the contract, but until they issue a task order and say, I actually have money, I want you to do something now, you're not going to make any money from that. So there is a patience thing here. There is a financial investment. There is knowledge that needs to be gained to be able to operate in the space. The good news with it is most of the contracts are long-term. They're bigger contracts. Once you get into agencies, you're typically there for a long time, as long as you're doing a good job.
Sure,
right? You got to
of
do a
course.
good job. So, and our
Yeah.
team does a phenomenal job. All of our teams do. So we've been at the IRS for many years, working on the same projects and new projects and so forth. So I like to balance it. Right now, I'm in this mode where I want to have commercial, I want to have federal, I want to have a nice blend of business from both sides, just because I know how to operate in both industries.
For sure. Jason Moccia, he's the CEO of OneSpring. So here's your chance to brag a little bit, Jason, and talk a little bit about maybe one or two success stories of customers that you've transformed in the work you do.
Well, there's one right now. I won't mention their name per se, but they're a large company here in Atlanta, and we're doing a lot of transformational type work for them, which is a lot of CX work, as I mentioned, the customer experience work. So it's really going out and understanding how do you create a journey and understand that journey for your customers through the life cycle of dealing with your brand. So one project we're working on is more around design standards for the brand and understanding, hey, if I have a project in IT and a project in marketing, how do we ensure that the designs are going to be the same, right? That we're not developing different looks and feels and different interactions, because we want the experience to be the same. Overall, we want consistency, and that's what a lot of companies are struggling with and trying to figure out is the consistency around these things. And we're helping them with that. So we're actually doing the internal interviews with different executives to try to figure out what are the standards need to be, and then actually creating those standards and rolling them out. So anybody that's designing anything within the company has access to these standards and can utilize them. So that's something called a design system. The number one problem that we face is culture. So, and this goes for every company out there, not this particular client. But the number one problem, actually I have statistics here, 90% of companies struggle with this, and it's culture. It's if you're going to have a customer-centric culture where every touch point that a customer goes through is optimized to where it doesn't matter, they have the same experience, quality experience, and you can track that, you have to get all your employees on board. This is not something that is done in a silo. So there was the recent article from the Harvard Business Review on this, and the top issue was culture. And that really starts with the leadership side. So if your leadership is not bought in on we have to have a great customer experience, we have to put customers at the center of our strategy, and that's going to permeate to our website, our call center, and how do we bring all these things together to not only look at the data on how we're doing, but to optimize what we're doing and to make changes based on the data we're getting. So unless you have a strong leader that is on board and all the leaders on board within an organization, the culture shifts, that's not going to happen. And the number two thing, actually, barrier here was organizational silos. So we've seen a lot where you'll have one group within a large company say, hey, we're going to do really good customer experience and we're going to create a new site and redesign our area of focus, but the business next door in the same company, the same department or different department isn't doing that, right? They're still doing what they want to do and how they do it. So you have these siloed groups creating different experiences, which causes more issues. And that's why I think it really starts with culture and leadership at the top.
Let me ask a question about culture, just so I understand. So by culture, it sounds like you're talking about strategic priorities. Is that a fair way to?
Yeah, it is. It's more. Yeah. It is more priorities. So if you look at, for example, just pick a type of leader. It could be HR, it could be CIO, leadership. They're all going to have different priorities. Or HR may be concerned with talent acquisition. How do we attract and retain the best talent? In fact, we just did a workshop at a SHRM event a couple weeks ago where we did a human-centered design session with 50-plus HR executives and managers in the room. And we posed that question. We said, how might you retain or attract and retain the best talent possible? It was interesting because technology didn't really surface. The number one thing that all the tables picked, and we had 5 tables with 10 people each and people watching in the background, the number one thing was culture. And we looked at it and said, where's the technology in this? Nobody's talking about technology. It's not a technology problem. It's a culture problem. So if everybody's not in agreement on what's a good customer experience and we're here for the customer, then it's not going to work well. So it does need to be a priority at a higher level. It can't be a CIO level, just an HR, SVP type level. It needs to be higher level executive focus and strategy that we're going to have a good customer experience, and you need to work this into your bottom line priorities. And unless that happens, then that's usually when we see the issues.
Yeah, so, on that point, I'd have to send folks to your website, because one of the things I saw there was you've got 5 most common mistakes that lead to project failure, and one of those is actually something you were just talking about, which is expecting technology to be the silver bullet. So you have to have more than just great technology.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we come across this problem where people lead with technology, and I understand why that is. It's an easier solution, right? You can see the technology, you can put your hands on it, play with it, right, and interact with it. So it's very easy when you're comparing things to look at, well, let me look at this vendor's technology, and I'll look at vendor A and B and compare them and decide which one is the best solution. And what they don't do in a lot of cases, they don't put the customer in the front of that and say, let's focus on them first, and the technology's there nowadays. Now, if you were to go back 10, 15 years ago, you didn't have as many choices. Now you have a plethora of choices out there. I mean, if you're looking for a CRM system, you're looking for a case management system, a website, you have things like WordPress and Drupal and different things you can utilize. So we're big advocates of, look, the technology's there. We can find a technology, I'm sure, to meet the needs. You need to focus on what the problem is first. And the only way to understand what the problem is to get in front of your customers and really extrapolate that from them. And it's not just about, let me do one survey or just ask them once. This is really about getting into the minds of what customers and users want, which is its own science. That's the human-centered design aspects I mentioned before. And then back into the technology. So we see a lot of companies that will just roll out some technology based on, or some software based on some underlying technology platform, and they end up failing as a result because they didn't really take the time to design, to the problem itself. So one of the core problems we see.
Great work here from the fascinating conversation with Jason Moccia. He's the CEO of OneSpring. We could talk for a while, Jason, but I probably ought to wrap it up and have you tell folks how they can get in touch if they want more information. Yeah,
sure. You can go to our website, just onespring.net, and that's all spelled out, onespring.net. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Jason Moccia, Moccia, and happy to connect with anybody and answer any questions you may have.
Sounds great. Jason, thanks for being here.
Thanks, John. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'd want to remind everybody that that white paper I mentioned is there on their website as well. Interesting reading for sure. Jason Moccia, CEO of OneSpring. So, folks, it's time to fly. And by that I mean let's connect with Office Angels. And if you need help curing the headaches of administrative tasks or bookkeeping, marketing, or presentations, doing workshops, well, check in with Office Angels. They're not a temp agency or a placement firm. They're a business support operation which matches your needs with angels who have the talent and experience necessary to help you maintain or grow your business. Your terms, your timeline. They lend a hand when needed, and they fly off when the job's done. So find out more at officeangels.us or call Chief Executive Angel, SES Cabito, at 770-442-9246. And before we wrap it up, I want to just point everyone to our social media channels where please connect with us there, Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you. North Fulton BRX is where you can find us. And check out our website, northfulton.businessradiox.com. Go click on the archives button. You'll find great guests that we've had over the 3 years this studio has been open. Over 400 guests have been through this studio. Folks like Jason are doing great work in our community. So connect with us there. Send us a note. Let us know you've done that. So for Jason Moccia with OneSpring, I'm your host, John Ray. Thanks for being here on North Fulton Business Radio.